footsteps were muffled by the carpet of fallen leaves. Tension hung thick in the air between them. Why did you insist on taking this path, Wine? He turned to face Wine, his eyes flashed irritation. I wouldn't have to if you hadn't been so stubborn about your sense of direction. We wouldn't be lost if you had agreed to go with Chris and the rest. Her response was sharp. Theon clenched his fist. This is all your fault, Wine. If you hadn't been so insistent on taking shortcuts, we wouldn't be in this mess. She narrowed her eyes. Oh please, you and your ego are the reason we are lost, Theon. Always thinking you know the best. Her tone cutting like a blade. I wish I had gone with Chris, she said with a sigh. Before Wine knew it, she was pinned against the tree. She gasped, holding Theon's jacket, and stared at him with wide eyes. Theon had his hand on the back of her head to prevent her from hitting the tree. If you regret so much coming with me, then why don't you go back? He spoke through gritted teeth, moving his face closer to her. Wine could hear her heart beating in her ears. They were so close, their faces almost touching. She could feel his warm breath brushing against her face. Theon stepped back and began walking tail-long steps. Startled, Wine sprinted behind him. Hey, Theon, wait for me. He didn't stop while Wine barely caught up with his pace. Can't you walk slow? She held his jacket. Breathing heavily, Theon stopped and turned towards her. Let's rest for a while. He kept the heavy bags. Wine nodded and sat. Why did you bring these 3 bags? They're so heavy. She spoke before drinking the water. Theon sat beside her while an idea popped into his mind. He smiled internally. Important stuff. We have to survive with something. She nodded in understanding. Let's get going in a few minutes. We need to find a safe place to stay. What if some wild animals attack us? She muttered, looking around timidly. We have insisted on coming on this trip. Now face the consequence. He shrugged his shoulders. One passed him a glare. Where are you going? She also stood, seeing him stand. I want to use the restroom. But here is no restroom. She stopped in midway and scratched her hair. Okay, we can go. Stay here, don't move an inch from here, understood? She nodded obediently. Theon walked away while Wine was looking around. 5 minutes passed when Wine heard a low howl. She looked around for Theon, but he was nowhere. Theon, she called him out when she suddenly heard a deep, menacing whisper in her ear. With a flinch, Wine screamed and jumped, keeping her hands on her ear. Theon laughed hysterically. She looked up at him and stood straight, staring at him. Wine, you're so timid. She pursed her lips. She felt as if her soul left her body. Then stopped laughing, seeing her shimmering eyes. What happened? She turned around and began walking. Wine, where are you going? He went behind her. Wine. He held her hand and turned her to face him. His heart ached, seeing tears rolling down her eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't know you would be so scared. She looked away from him, wriggling in his grip, attempting to break free. I'm sorry, please don't cry. He cupped her face and said softly. Wine looked at his eyes, which flashed concern. Your sorry won't fix how badly I was scared. I felt like my soul just left my body. She sobbed. He pulled her into a hug, not knowing how to comfort her. Wine was still sobbing quietly. I would have died out of fear. I didn't know it would scare you so much, he said with remorse. She wiped her face and pulled out. Let's go, it will be dark soon, she said, looking around timidly and sniffing. Theon nodded, picking up the bags and holding her hand gently. He led the way through the bushes. After walking for a few minutes, they found a safe place near the lake. We finally got a place, she spoke with a sense of relief. Let's secure the tents. They kept the bags and began securing the tents. After securing the tents, they arranged their belongings inside and said, Are you hungry? He asked, reclining on the air mattress. Not really. Do you want to eat something? Theon shook his head. I don't have an appetite. There are some snacks in that bag, you can have them. Wine opened the bag and took out the snacks. Theon stared at her as she ate them. He felt love and fondness spreading through his chest. As soon as Wine met his gaze, he lied, placing his arm over his eyes. She shrugged her shoulders and made a place for herself beside him. Then what if some wild animals come here? What will we do? She spoke as she laid beside him. Nothing, I'll just hand you to them and run for my life, he said jokingly, while slapped his arm. That was mean. He chuckled, glancing at her, while turned her back to him when she heard howl from afar. Then did you hear that? Her voice laced with fear. He hummed in response, while sat straight. Then I'm scared. She tugged his arm, then opened his eyes. They are far away from here. I'm here with you, just sleep. He held her wrist and rubbed his thumb over it to calm her. She laid back, scooting closer to him. I'm scared, she whispered again, then snaked his arm around her waist and pulled her closer. Don't be scared as long as I'm with you. We'll make it out of here. He spoke softly, staring at her with an affectionate gaze, while nodded, snuggling close to him and closing her eyes. Next morning, Wine woke up with her legs locked with hands while half of her body was resting on him comfortably. She stared lovingly at him as he was sleeping soundly. She touched his eyebrow and trailed her finger over his handsome features. This was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Are you trying to take advantage of me? She gasped inaudibly and pulled away, feeling her cheeks heating. No, I was just... She left her sentence incomplete and walked out. Thang smiled, feeling the glint of hope. The rest of the time, Wine remained silent while Thang cooked breakfast at the campfire. I didn't know you brought the whole kitchen with you. I had to keep all these things in my car, but we lost our way. We are lucky to have this. Wine nodded, taking a bite. My belongings are in the car, she mumbled inaudibly. Wine, I'll go and see if there is a network so we can contact someone. What if there is no network? Do you think Chris will be looking for us? I'll go and find a way back if there is no network. I hope at least I can get my car. He stood. As for Chris, he would be looking for you, not me. Stop mentioning him. Irritation and jealousy were evident in his tone. Wine pressed her lips to stop her smile. Are you jealous of him? She teased him. Tan stepped closer to her and leaned in. Yes, I am. She stared at him amused. Why? Because you are my wife. I like you and I can't bear anyone to have a look at you while that bastard openly flirts with you. He rubbed his thumb over her lips. I stared at him dumbfounded, not expecting him to respond so straightforwardly. She felt butterflies released in the pit of her stomach. They felt same for each other. Don't go out of the tent if it's dark and I don't return. He turned around to leave. Then take care. He nodded and walked out. Wine sat smiling like a fool and touching her lips. She giggled and stood feeling around. After a few moments, she happily went inside the tent and took out Than's shirt and sweatpants. She changed into them and went to the lake to wash her clothes. After washing the clothes, she laid them out to dry and went inside the tent. Wine was combing her hair when she heard footsteps and someone's presence behind her. She turned around with a terror. You scared me. She clutched her chest and spoke with relief, seeing Theung. I didn't mean to scare you, he said huskily, eyeing her head to toe. Wine was suddenly too self-conscious. She scratched her neck, holding the hem of her shirt. I'm sorry, my bag is in the car, so I didn't have anything to wear, she said, awkwardly confused by his intense gaze. Don't be. How did you come back? I forgot to take my phone with me. He searched for his phone. Wine nodded, helping him find the phone. I'll get going, he said as he took out his phone. Take care. He patted her cheek gently and made his way out. Theo, I feel the same for you. She mustered up the courage and sat from behind, hoping he heard it. Then smiled, hearing her out and walking inside the forest. Time skip. It's been 15 days since they were stuck in the forest. Theo found his car and brought it back. However, the car had some problems, so he decided to go out of the forest and get a mechanic as he found a way back. Today they were leaving as Thang got the car checked by the mechanic in the nearby village. Now it was 4 in the morning. They packed everything and sat in the car. I'll miss this place, she said sadly. We have so many memories here. They hummed in response and leaned to buckle the seatbelt. It was worth it, losing our way back, wasn't it? His tone was meaningful. Wine looked away, hiding her smile in excitement. Chen kissed her neck, taking her off guard, and drove off as if he did nothing. Wine was excited to give a new start to their relationship. She fell asleep as they drove out of the forest. Chen was glancing at her from time to time when the car came to a sudden halt on the dark, isolated road. Wine stayed awake while Chen was trying to start the ignition. What happened? I don't know, I'll just check it. He hopped out of the car and opened the bonnet. Wine sighed, feeling a sense of uneasiness in her chest, and leaned on her seat. After a few moments, Chen closed the bonnet and came back. Wine, I don't have water in the car. I'll go and bring water from the nearby lake. Stay in the car and lock it. No matter what happens, don't come out of the car until I return. Got it? Can I come with you? She held his hand. No, this place is dangerous. I can't risk your safety. Stay here and don't come out. Got it? He softly kissed her hand and walked away. Wine sat still, unable to shake off the feeling of uneasiness. 15 minutes passed, but Chen hadn't returned. Wine's heart trembled for some unknown reason. She got out of the car. The cold air sent chills down her spine. She began walking in the direction where Chen had gone. She had moved a few steps forward when three well-built guys appeared out of nowhere. She trembled in fear as they moved closer to her with sly smiles on their faces and stared at her with lustful gazes. Wine turned around and began running back to the car as they spoke nasty things, while the guys followed her. Stop there, you can't go without letting us have fun with you. He grabbed her neck from behind and flung her in front of them. Let me go, please, she cried. They laughed, pushing her on the ground. Wine hissed and tried to stand, but one of them hovered over her, holding her hands above her head. Chen, she screamed as the guy tore off her shirt with a swift pull. Chen, her scream echoed. One of them was touching her legs under her pants while the other two were roaming their hands from her face to her lower body. Wine cried, screaming and throwing her legs in air, feeling disgusted. When Wine felt she lost everything, just then the guy towards her legs received a blow. The other two looked at Chen and stood. Chen's veins in the forehead had popped out of anger. He blew on both of their faces. The first guy stood and hit Chen. Wine stood crying and watching them as they were hitting Chen. She looked around when her eyes landed on the wood. She picked it up, hit one of them on the head. He staggered backward while others alerted. They turned to face Wine. Chen picked up the large stone and hit it on their heads. They lost their guard while Chen hit three of them until they fell unconscious. Wine hugged him, crying hysterically on his chest. Chen took off his jacket and wrapped it around her, breaking the hug. Didn't I tell you to stay in the car? He asked in a dangerously dark tone. Then why did you come out? He yelled, making her flinch. Wine sobbed hard. He cut in. Just shut up. Do you have any idea what would have happened if I was a second late? What would have happened to you if they had beaten me to death? Do you think I could have fought them all alone? There were freaking three guys. Luck was by our side. We were both saved, and they ended this way. His voice echoed throughout the road. Wine lowered her head, shedding tears. Get back into the car, go. She ran towards the car. He ran his fingers through his hair, breathing heavily and trying to calm his nerves. He picked up the water bottle and poured it down in the engine. He then hopped into the car and started the ignition. Wine stared at his bruised face with a pained expression. The veins in his forehead and neck were popping out of anger as he drove while he was holding the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Time skip. The tension in the air was thick as they reached home. Chen stopped by a clinic to treat Wine's scrapes on elbows and knees and his bruises. Now Wine had freshened up while Chen was talking on a call. We are fine, Mom, he sighed for the 100th time. Don't come now, Wine is asleep. He paused, hearing her out. You can come tomorrow, we are already tired. We need rest. I promise I'll come myself and bring Wine to you if not. Wine stood behind them, hearing their conversation. After a while, Chen declined the call and stared out of the window. He hadn't spared her a glance since they had returned. Wine reluctantly stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his torso, pressing her cheek on his back. I'm sorry, 𝐬𝐭. I didn't mean to trouble you. Her tone was damp. 𝐬𝐭 clenched his fist and then moved away her hands. Tears rolled down her eyes. Are you disgusted by me? 𝐬𝐭 turned towards her sharply. Because that touch, 𝐬𝐭 grabbed her jaw and kissed her passionately. Wine froze with wide eyes as 𝐬𝐭 hungrily devoured her lips. Think before you speak, he whispered between the kiss. Wine pulled away. I can't breathe, she mumbled, resting her head on his chest. 𝐬𝐭 stroked her hair, breathing heavily. Talk nonsense again and I'll make sure you don't breathe anymore. She lifted her head. I just thought, he cut in. You thought nonsense. I was angry at you for not obeying me. He cupped her face gently, his gaze softening. Can you imagine how I felt when I saw you in that condition? What could have happened? She nodded, lowering her head. I know, I'm sorry, I can't change it, but I promise I'll never disobey you again. He let out a sigh and kissed her temple. Why did you lie to Mom that I was sleeping? She asked curiously. She would have come now and I'm in no mood to hear her nagging. Besides, I want to spend some time with my wife. He caressed her face. Wine smiled, wrapping her arms around him and hiding her face in his chest.